Hi, I'm Eric Smith. I'm the Director of the Office of Innovation and Entrepreneurship here at the Economic Development Administration. Welcome to the FY22 Build to Scale program webinar. Really thankful for your interest, and we're going to dive right into some updates about the program this year, the application timeline, and the application itself. As I said, we'll review the program and some of the updates to the program. We'll take a look at application information and then the timeline for this application. So the Build to Scale program is about fostering globally competitive, resilient national economies through awards that help grow scalable technology startups and increase access to entrepreneur-ready capital. Now, our statutory authority, Section 27C of the Stephenson-Wadler Technology Innovation Act, directs us to strengthen regional innovation initiatives, build innovation-based businesses, enable companies to scale new products, processes, and services in the market, and ultimately make investments in programs that achieve measurable economic impacts like new business starts, new jobs, venture capital raised in the region, and more. Just so you know a little bit about EDA and our structure, we're located in the headquarters office in Washington, D.C., and we have 6 regional offices: Philadelphia, Atlanta, Chicago, Denver, Austin, and Seattle. Some of our colleagues in those offices provide excellent support to you all and to us as we administer this program, so strongly suggest that you reach out to them for their advice if you have any questions as well. Now, at a high level, what the Build to Scale program does is promote technology-based economic development, and we fund these direct drivers of high growth industry clusters, high growth technology startups, ultimately creating wealth, creating economic opportunity in a region via globally competitive industries and high quality jobs and entrepreneurship. Success for us, increasing the formation of and access to equity-based capital, increasing the number of high-quality jobs in a region, uh, scaling entrepreneurial ecosystems and strengthening them so that entrepreneurs live in environments in which they can thrive and in which they can grow their businesses, and ultimately making sure that these ecosystems are diverse, equitable, inclusive, and accessible. A little bit about the past. OIE's grant portfolio currently spans investments in all 50 states and in 2 territories. It's 326 grants and $174 million in federal funding. And the program's been growing year over year. You can take a look here. This year in FY22, we have $45 million available through this program. And as those of you who are familiar know, we actually have 2 components to this program, the Venture Challenge and the Capital Challenge. Last year, you can see we deployed $37 million in these proportions, and we'll get into the breakdown for this year in a bit. But first, I want to go over the programs themselves. First, the Venture Challenge. So here we're looking to advance technology-based economic development, or TBED. We do love our acronyms. But really, this is about commercializing new technologies, strengthening these industry clusters, ensuring increasing numbers of high quality, high paying jobs through entrepreneurship and specifically technology entrepreneurship, not just software, but technologies all across the board. Competitive proposals in this area are going to support these technology-based industries that have the potential for entrepreneurship, producing scalable businesses, identifying the regional assets that those businesses can leverage, ultimately commercializing those new technologies and facilitating the adoption of those technologies and the deployment of those technologies, and ultimately also furthering the creation of high-quality jobs. One of the changes this year is in the tiers here. So we do have the build and the scale tiers of the Venture Challenge, just like last year. The build scale stage largely the same, looking for projects that are piloting new solutions or implementing a proven solution in a new area, up to $750,000 in federal funding over the grant periods available through the build tier. On the scale tier, this is about adapting or augmenting an existing initiative and where that initiative has demonstrated past success. This year, we've increased the cap here. Scale proposals are eligible for up to $2 million in federal funding over the grant period. And overall, 38 of the 45 million of this year's Build to Scale funding will be available under the Venture Challenge. The other part of the program is the Capital Challenge. Here we're seeking to increase access to capital, increasing the formation of that capital, particularly equity and equity-based funding, where there's a demonstrated opportunity to invest, a demonstrated pipeline of new technologies and new businesses. So this funding provides operational support for growing and deploying equity capital into startups, also for equipping the next generation of investment managers, facilitating deal flow, due diligence, closing deals, and introducing new investment opportunities that are equity based. So this is a slightly bigger change. This year we've added a tier. We've noticed that there are kind of two different flavors of these proposals, and we're kind of tailoring the funding amounts for that. So for the form tier, this is about identifying and organizing investors in the region, building that capacity for that network of investors to source, vet, and ultimately close early stage equity-based deals. This is up to $300,000 in federal funding for the grant period. On the deploy tier, this is about connecting new investors with these startups and ultimately doing that by raising a fund that is going to close investments in companies with high growth potential and serve as a institutionalized source of equity investments in startups in the region. For this deploy tier, up to $750,000 in federal funding is available over the grant period. Now we'll get into some broad rules about the program. So despite the fact that we do support equity funds and angel networks and other investment networks, our funding and the match funding cannot be directly invested into companies or directly given to entrepreneurs. Another rule is that we only allow one application per challenge. So you can apply to both the venture and the capital challenge, but you cannot submit more than one application to the same challenge. You've got to be eligible to receive funding, and eligible recipients, in order to be selected, in order to receive a grant, there must be at least a one-to-one match. So that's $1 of matching funds in kind or cash for every federal dollar. You've got to provide that and show evidence of it. For technical requirements, I'll say this a lot over the course of this presentation, but please read the Notice of Funding Opportunity. That being said, these are some common technical deficiencies. One is whether or not the entity is eligible, and I'll have some more information about that shortly. Missing documentation. Certain documentation can be really critical, and also undermatch. You got to make sure the match itself is eligible and aligns with the program. This is a prerequisite for an application moving on to merit review or our sort of programmatic evaluation. So again, really encourage you to check this part of the NOFO out, the Notice of Funding Opportunity, or reach out to EDA if you've got any questions. We do provide pre-submission technical review, so we'll take a look at your package and give you any advice on whether or not you're missing a form or something administrative like that. But the last day to request that is May 20th. So please do request that early. One other thing that this is a little bit of a change federal government wide. You now need a unique entity identifier or UEI to apply. This is assigned by the System for Award Management, SAM.gov. As of April 4th, what SAM used to use, which was the DUNS number, which was assigned by Dun & Bradstreet, as of April 4th, we have transitioned to the unique entity identifier. So please sign in to sam.gov early. It can take some time to resolve issues there. It can take some time to apply for a UEI if you don't yet have one. So please, if you're considering applying, take some time, log into sam.gov early. We've got some links here and in the Notice of Funding Opportunity that can help you get to the right place in sam.gov to make sure you've got a UEI. We've also got the Federal Service Desk phone number listed here on this slide for you. Some other important pre-submission requirements. Some of these things can take a long time, in 3 to 4 weeks, which is up to half of the application period in some cases. So please make sure you're registered in grants.gov. Please make sure you're registered and up to date in sam.gov, what we just talked about. And we'll also, I want to point out SPOC compliance. So depending on which state your project serves or which states, there may be a state single point of contact compliance. Please take a look at the section in the NOFO on this. We're happy to answer questions there as well about applicability, but it does involve interacting with a state government organization, and it is a executive order requirement that we have to comply with. So if you've got any questions about that, again, please reach out. I do want to go over eligible entities. So this is the list. I won't recite it to you here, but I will highlight that we have asterisked a couple of these, and this handful of entities are sometimes the eligibility showing of eligibility can be somewhat complex here. And so if your entity or if the entity that your organization is applying with is one of these types of entities, has been organized in this way, I definitely encourage you to reach out and talk to us about that because there can be some very sort of entity by entity specific requirements to show eligibility there. One thing to note is that when you do reach out to OIE, we're happy to provide administrative and technical guidance, but unfortunately, to make the competition fair and to make sure we're giving the same advice to everyone, we can't opine on the merits of your approach. We can't help you develop partnerships during the application period. That being said, in addition to any calls or emails, we'll be compiling those questions and we'll be aggregating them up and rolling them up into updates to our frequently asked questions, and we'll roll those out via webinars as scheduled here on this slide. So if you do have any questions based on this webinar or based on the NOFO, please get those to us by 5/2, May 2nd, and we'll update the FAQs and go over those updates in another pre-recorded webinar. And the same thing, if you have any questions later on in the process, please get those to us by 5/20 so we can do the same thing again with that next round of questions. You can submit your questions. The best way to do it is old-fashioned email, oie@eda.gov. So now I want to talk about how to get to the Notice of Funding Opportunity. Now that I've mentioned it a couple times, you can find it in grants.gov via search. You can also find it via eda.gov/OIE/build to scale. We link to that directly, and we also link to the grants.gov listing. This is what it'll look like when you see the grant opportunity, and you can see the funding opportunity number up there. It's the one that starts with EDA HDQ, and that's a search term you can use to find this. If you click on the package tab, you can see it circled in red there. You can see the package details right there, and you can also download the Notice of Funding Opportunity if you click Related Documents. When you decide to apply, you apply in grants.gov, and you can see that the Venture Challenge and the Capital Challenge each have their own package, is what grants.gov calls it. So please make sure you're clicking Apply under Actions for the right challenge that you're applying to. Now I want to go over the application itself, some of the administrative stuff, and also some of the substance. So standard forms, always important. This is pretty clear in grants.gov, but we've also laid it out in the NOFO and here. These are the 4 forms that are required. The project narrative, this is really the meat of your application, describing what you're doing, what the name of your project is, how it's going to address needs, and how it meets the requirements set out in the NOFO. And if you take a look at pages 9 and 11, you can see that we've provided you all with a structure for that project narrative that'll help you organize the proposal and us understand what you're proposing. I also want to say that a competitive project narrative, some tips and tricks, be clear and concise, always helpful. Make sure that you're clear about what the gap or what the challenge is in the region and how the strategies and projects that you're proposing will fill that gap or address that challenge. Make sure to be clear about the partnerships that you're leveraging and be clear about the roles. Um, Make sure that your proposal has clear milestones, proposes a schedule of how that work will be done and when those goals will be achieved. Make sure that the scope of work is set out and is achievable, and make sure you're proposing metrics, not only the basic ones that we're asking for, but also the metrics that you believe are important to enable you to measure success. Another very important part of the proposal is the budget narrative and staffing plan. This is a little bit shorter, but is really the how the finances are going to work, how you're proposing to use the funding that we're providing and that you're providing as match. Note we've got some common mistakes here listed here. Make sure that the funding that you're proposing, the way you're proposing to use it, are eligible. We've updated section D7 of the NOFO with some, I hope, clearer guidance for you. Insufficient match, uses of funding that don't actually sort of logically align with the scope of work, or a budget narrative that's inconsistent with the standard forms 424 and 424A. On the staffing plan side, also very important, but oftentimes personnel roles are unclear, so vague job descriptions for positions that are unfilled, lack of clarity in which roles lead and support the project. Sometimes folks with a pretty small allocation to the project are actually providing a big leadership role. Sometimes it's people who are fully allocated to the project, so understanding roles and responsibility and accountability is important and being clear about that. And then making sure that the line item total, again, matches up with the budget narrative itself and the 424A. We do have an optional template. You can find that in the resources list, again, at eda.gov/OIE/build to scale. On the match side, can't say this enough, a minimum of 1-to-1 is required. So for every federal dollar you're requesting, you've got to show that you've got at least $1 of match from your organization, whether that's cash or in kind. Matching share greater than that requirement will be accepted, but it's not necessary to qualify, and it's not a factor when it comes to competitiveness. So just overmatching for the sake of showing a lot of match does not make your project more competitive. For match, we do need commitment letters, and each of those commitment letters do need to show that the funding is committed, available, and unencumbered. That's available when it's needed. If you've got any questions about this, it's also a common sticking point. So again, feel free to reach out. There are also some sources of match that actually will require our approval or may need some advice from us. So contractors that are going to be supporting your project also providing match, that can be a sticky issue we suggest you reach out for. Other federal funding is sometimes just statutorily ineligible. So if you do have other federal funding that you're considering as match, please reach out to us as early as possible. Unrecovered indirect costs and program income are also may require EDA approval. So would suggest reaching out if you've got questions about those. And we've got some resources for you down there in the corner to help you handle match and commitment letter questions. So for organizations that are not states, Indian tribes, units of government, or public institutions of higher education, we are required to have a show of government support. And that can be a little tricky. It's actually not federal government support. It's a showing of support from your state, county, local government. I want to say it again, support from federal officials does not meet this requirement, and support from non-governmental entities doesn't meet this requirement. So typically this is going to be a state legislator, a mayor, a governor's office, perhaps a state agency. And again, this one can be tricky to navigate sometimes. And we're happy to provide advice on whether or not a particular entity is in fact a unit of government that can provide you all the support. We do list out these other technical requirements just in tabular form in Appendix B. We've got the one version for government entities, and then the other version for non-government entities that need that showing of government support. So suggest you take a look at these optional checklists in Appendix B. On the substance side and how we evaluate, this year we have 7 evaluation criteria. They apply to both the venture and capital challenges. Again, only applications that pass technical review will go on to merit review, and all of these criteria are equally weighted. The first criteria is that resources, assets, and equity in the ecosystem. How are you leveraging those assets and resources? How are you making sure that the project and the ecosystem are equitable? The nature of the proposed solution. Is it achievable? Is it aligned with the opportunity that you've identified? And does it meet the needs of the population in your region? Partner entities. Are you clearly defining those entities? Are those partnerships realistic? Will it be leveraged in a way that will actually result in growth? And it's not just the sort of additive sum of the partners' contributions, but those partners are going to have a multiplicative impact when they're working together. Measurable goals. How have you identified SMART goals, so specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound? And how do those SMART goals align with the purpose of your proposed project? Continued impact. So to what extent is the program that you're proposing durable and sustainable? Can it become self-sustaining, or is there another plan for continuing these efforts once the federal funding has passed? Budget and staffing. Is it realistic? Is the financial, human, and programmatic resources, are those resources enough? Are they appropriate for the project? And lastly, alignment with the goals of build to scale. We've set forth a number of prompts in the notice of funding opportunity. How well does the proposal respond to those prompts? We'll rate all of these on a scale of 1 to 7 and process all these scores, and that's how we end up with the evaluation of these proposals on their merits. As far as the timeline goes, I know this is very important. We launched this competition on April 14th. Again, the first frequently asked questions webinar will happen on May 9th. We'll update the FAQ in advance of that, so please email questions to us for consideration in that webinar and that FAQ update by May 2nd. May 20th is the last day to submit pre-submission technical review, so if you're considering doing that, please do that early. The second FAQ update and webinar related to that will be May 26th. So again, 5/20. Please email questions to OIE by 5/20. And ultimately, applications are due on June 13th. June 13th, again, is the deadline. It's at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you are somewhere in time zone west of us here in DC, please make sure to remember that the deadline is 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time, not your local time. We'll announce the awards sometime in the fall of this calendar year, and we anticipate that projects will start in November of 2022. I want to thank you all today for taking the time to listen to the webinar. Thank you for your interest in the program. We're really looking forward to getting your questions, to getting your proposals, and ultimately to selecting our next cohort of Build to Scale recipients. Thanks again for your time, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.